So Strava, the year in sport, is a bit of a copycat of Spotify Wrapped. I think realistically, all it encourages are two things: comparison, comparing to others, seeing what else other people have achieved and seeing how you rank or stack up compared to them. Comparison to yourself, your past self. Are you better or worse than you used to be? And the second thing being, I think it encourages this obsession with overtraining, with doing more volume, with running more kilometres, and simply looking at training as quantity over quality. So we have to give credit where credit is due, and to be fair, this year Strava did include some more fun metrics that aren't all about duration, distance or volume. They included some things about who you trained with most frequently or who you ran with most frequently. There was a heat map showing you kind of your most common running routes, your top 5 locations. All that was really fun, really interesting. But still, the main point, the thing that most people posted about and kind of the key features were whether you did more activities, whether you ran more distance, whether you did more elevation, and I can't remember the last one, but I'll insert it here. Now, all of those things are interesting and I think helpful in terms of observing and monitoring our training, but what they're not helpful at is for anyone who had a tough year, anyone who was injured, anyone who was sick, anyone who wasn't able to do as much running as they normally would or as much training, can be quite disheartening. And something that we know from technology companies and apps and the internet is that there is a chemical reaction. Wow, who knew? Bush turkeys could just jump that high. A chemical reaction within our brain that sends a signal, and there's something about dopamine and all that stuff. When we see flashing lights, or when we see green or red colours or arrows or certain noises and certain words. And what Strava do really well is make it really clear when you're doing well or when you're not doing well. So what our brain starts to do subconsciously is we continuously see either these red arrows going down, meaning we're not good enough, or we see these green arrows going up, meaning we're good, we're doing enough. And we see it every time we open our Strava app, and then more profoundly in the yearly wrap-up, we see how we stand in comparison to ourselves last year, and we see how we compare to our peers. And what I think is both good and bad about running is that there's no real finish line, there's no kind of ceiling to what you can achieve. There's no point at which you go, okay, I've completed it, I've done enough, which is cool because you can keep striving for more. But the way that Strava takes this is you need to keep running more and doing more volume, and unfortunately we just don't have a limitless physical or physiological capability. And what usually tends to happen, as we know as runners, is the more we do, the more frequently we're injured, and therefore the more time we spend out of running, and therefore we're not actually able to do what we love. And all our Strava tells us is we're not good enough anymore. And what I think is really interesting, just anecdotally, based on the number of stories I saw people sharing their numbers on, it seemed that the more experienced runners were less satisfied with their numbers than the newer runners. So what I saw a lot was, 100, 150, 200% increases in kilometres per year for some newer runners. And with the more experienced runners, there was maybe a 5% increase, maybe 0, maybe there wasn't even a decrease. And the comments to people about themselves around this was much more in a negative light, much more about, I had so many injuries this year, or terrible year, or gonna do more next year, or those kind of comments. And what this tells me is that the more experience you get, the harder it is to improve or show progress through a simple metric of training volume. Now, the reason this is a problem is because we all only have so much time, so much energy, and so much tissue capacity to handle a certain amount of load. We can't just keep increasing our kilometres per week and our kilometres per year, year on year, forever. We will eventually find a point at which we can no longer sustain that duration or volume. Therefore, we need to just maintain where we're at which will give us our 0% change, or we need to do less, which will give us that big, scary, red down arrow. Now, I know some people couldn't care less. For me, I'm not that fussed, but I know a lot of runners who really care about this stuff, and I can see why, and it's so kind of intertwined in our being to compare ourselves, and this gives us a pretty clear picture of where we stand amongst fellow runners. Now, I'm absolutely not saying that we shouldn't talk about how far we run, or we shouldn't compare, or we shouldn't track these things, we should all go off the grid. Absolutely not. But I think there are just some more interesting, fun metrics that still monitor progress, that are useful for training, and are more sustainable to achieve rather than simply running more. The only mentions about quality or pace or speed were for being the fastest on a particular segment. That's cool, that's great, but there's no talk about how much more consistent we were. Whether that means we actually ran more or not, I think is irrelevant. But did we show up when we said we were going to show up? Were we attending our quality sessions once a week, every week? Were we deloading regularly? Were we giving ourselves enough rest days? Were we focusing on things outside of our running and our training? Were we focusing on our mental health, our friendships, our cross training, our strength training? None of that was measured. What about how many gels we took on a run, or how many calf raises we did, how many memories we made, how many people we met, what run clubs did we go to, what new places or areas did we explore? These are the things that are important. These are the things that matter. You're not going to sit down with your grandkids and say, oh, back in 2024, I ran 5,000 kilometres in a year. You're going to say, wow, in 2024, I went on the most incredible trail run in the rainforest with my friends. We swam in waterfalls, we saw rare blue crayfish, and had the best day. No one cares about how many kilometres you're running. Of course it matters. Of course, if you're training for an event, you want to be hitting a certain distance per week, you want to be getting some long runs in. I'm not saying we just need to do away with programs and do away with metrics and throw our watches in the bin. But what I want to highlight is the importance of looking at our training holistically and celebrating the other wins, celebrating the fact that we successfully rehabbed a stress fracture and we successfully returned to running from injury. We went to the physio 6 weeks straight, we followed what they said, and we're now able to run again. We found a new hobby. We enjoyed going on hikes or swimming while we weren't running. All of those other things are far more important than how many kilometres you ran. Now, before I got a chance to say anything about this, two of my favourite people, Freya from Reframe and Felix Oates, both put up incredible posts on their Instagram pages about their thoughts around this. I really encourage you to check out both of their pages because they've got some great thoughts around this topic and running and training more broadly. I'm currently running on beautiful Camaragal country and just want to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land and really honour their commitment to looking after the land, the animals, and just feel so grateful and honoured to get to run through these beautiful places that we are so lucky to call home and share with those around us. I also wonder too, from a non-injury perspective, what if you were a marathon runner in 2023 and then you decided to train for a 5k? There's no praise for that. There's no, wow, congrats, you got so much faster. It's just, oh, you ran 30% less than last year. Which again, it doesn't matter. We are adults. We are strong, independent individuals and humans who are resilient and don't rely on metrics and praise from a technology app. But I do just think it highlights more broadly the culture of running and the messages that are put out to the greater community. And I think it's much deeper than just a running app sharing some stats. I think it just showcases, wow, look at this. It showcases a greater issue of this necessity to do more across multiple fields, not just in running, but spending more time on our phones, training more, working harder, working later, all of that. I think it all is encompassed and really highlighted across this tiny little thing, which for a lot of people is insignificant, but for a lot of others could be quite detrimental to their mental health and their training. And if that is you, if you are someone who has struggled kind of seeing what other people are posting or seeing your decrease in training in this year compared to last, I really encourage you to reach out to Freya from Reframe. I'm sure she's got some incredible resources, and she offers some sessions for people who are injured or coming back from running, or people who are uninjured and just want to talk about how they feel in regards to their training. I think it's a super important topic, and we shouldn't feel kind of ashamed or guilty if we are kind of upset by any of this. Wow, this is just stunning. I'm sorry. I'm trying to have a serious moment with you, but I really can't concentrate because it's so nice. But yeah, I think give yourself some credit. Try and reflect yourself. Make your own Strava year in sport. Freya put out a big list of other things that we can focus on and other metrics that are really important, and I mentioned a few in this video as well, and I'd love and encourage you to create your own list. What did you achieve this year, or what things were you working on? What were you hoping to do this year, and were there things that you didn't quite get to that you'd like to focus on in 2025? Yeah, create your own list, write your own narrative, ignore social media. It is just out there to suck you in to the algorithm, and without getting too woo-woo, let's just run because we love running, do it for ourselves, get out in nature, and take a breath. To be completely honest with you, I'm just trying to reflect back to when I saw my Strava year in sport and kind of remember what I was first thinking. And I think initially I was like, nice, like, I don't know what it was, 20%, 15% increase in distance. I was like, yeah, you did, like, you ran so much more, like, how good is that? And my elevation was up, which, on a personal note, the elevation one was kind of cool because I went to Europe and I ran up mountains every day, and that was so different to my year in Australia the year before. So for me, that was really cool. And I think those are the things that are so much more interesting and more important than how much you did, but more about why you did it. Like, were you training for an ultra and therefore your training was increased? Were you training for a 10K, so maybe you're doing a little bit less? Did your elevation change because of where you were? There's so many more interesting things that are kind of behind the numbers rather than simply the numbers themselves. I think it's more about what they represent and the stories behind them. And I just think while distance is good and helpful and interesting, and definitely something that I have focused a lot on in my training, and, you know, trying to be consistent, hitting a certain number of Ks and increasing that, and I think there's a lot of value in that. Training for longer distances, I think volume is a key part of that, but I also think there's just way more cool stuff that goes on behind the scenes than just how far you're running. I'm really not sure, and I'd love to know, like, what reasons people have when sharing this stuff on social media. I think, like everything, we want to look good, we want to show off, we want to show the best parts of ourselves, we want to brag to our friends. I think deep down, as much as people say, oh no, it's just for me, or it's just a memory roll, or it's just for me to look back on, like, I just don't know if we can fully ever separate our ego and our insecurities from what we post online. I mean, let me know if you've done it and how you feel about it, and be really curious. But I think within all of us, we are competitive beings, we are primal. So, hello, sorry, thank you. We want to do better, we want to improve, and we want people to know about it. So yeah, interested about all of it. Don't fully have fleshed out thoughts, but just interested to hear what you guys think.